All right, welcome back. You tuned in again. Of course, you know what time it is and you know who it is. So I saw in the previous two tapes that some people got some pretty good new information as regards to the Dajjal or the false leader or the false world ruler. So what I'm going to do is it's one more chapter in this book that hits on a very, very important, relevant subject as it pertains to this. And I want to go over this last part before before we may transition into a new topic or subject overall. So in this tape, we're going to continue our study into the scientific branch of eschatology. And as I've told you all before, eschatology is when you study past events, current events, and you make projections on what you think is going to happen into the future. We're going to talk a little bit about the super technology or the scepter or the staff of Solomon. OK, the scepter or the staff of Solomon, aka the super technology of Solomon. And we're going to also talk about the type of knowledge that the Dajjal had access to, which is also the same type of knowledge that was introduced to Adam and Eve while they were in paradise by the adversary. OK, so we're going to go over a variety of things, in particular, looking at the left hand information on the tree of knowledge. That's a very, very important theme in this tape. So we're going forward, with understanding our eschatology, but we're going to get a little bit deeper into some of the Freemasonic mysteries that are studied by a lot of these scientific Shriners and a lot of the occult Freemasons that are throughout the world. So most of us that are familiar with, Freemasonic literature, that when a person is initiated, they have to basically go through the position or the role of Hiram Abiff. And Hiram Abiff basically was a mason or a master builder who lended his services to King Solomon. And he was a Phoenician from Tyre. OK, so as I've told you all before, in the ancient world, the various Shemitic peoples, whether they were, eventually ruling in Carthage. But even in the ancient world, when they were Sidonians, Tyrians, Phoenicians, etc., some of those people, allowed Israelites to live in their civilizations. And during the time of King Solomon, he had a very, very close relationship with the king of Tyre, who actually helped him construct the temple. So King Solomon is very, very important in Masonic literature. And when they become Shriners, they start to research some of the mysteries of Solomon as it pertains to his technology and how he was able to rule and had such an efficient rule. All right. So what we're going to do in this tape is I'm going to go back in my book called The Quran, Dajjal, and the Jasad. All right, by Imran Hussein. I'm going to end this tape with reading in that book, chapter 5. But prior to that, I want to add some extra context also when I talked a little bit about the autochthonous human and how we basically are living souls in flesh and how we actually are above the angels and above the jinn. All right. And when I say jinn, it could be either a righteous, just spiritual entity or a corrupt, demonic spiritual entity. So I also want to go into the Quran and give you all some surahs or some chapters you can look at so you can get a greater understanding of why or at least of where I got the information on the autochthonous human being the highest order. So the first thing I want to do is we're going to go and visit Surah 20 and we're going to read 114 through 124. So I'm going in the Quran right now. We're going to read Surah 20 and we're going to read 114, verse 114 through 124. And we'll kind of, analyze this as we go through. And once again, this is just for us to get a good context, because in a minute, when I start talking about how Solomon had the jinn working for him and how later on the Dajjal or the false leader was going to try to be a imposter version of Solomon. And he was going to try to get these jinn to work for him as well. So, in order to understand that, you got to get this background real quick. So let's read. High above all is Allah or God, the King, the truth, but not in haste with the Quran before its revelation to thee is completed. But say, O my Lord, advance me in knowledge. We had already beforehand taken the covenant of Adam, but he forgot, and we found on his part no firm resolve. When we said to the angels, prostrate yourself to Adam, they prostrated themselves, but not Iblis. He refused. Then we said, O Adam, verily this is an enemy to thee and thy wife. So let him not get you both out of the garden, so that thou art landed in misery. There is therein enough provision for thee not to go hungry, nor to go naked, nor to suffer from thirst, nor from the sun's heat. But Satan whispered evil to him. He said, O Adam, shall I lead thee to the tree of eternity, and to a kingdom that never decays? In the result, they both ate of the tree, and so their nakedness appeared to them. They began to sew together for their covering leaves from the garden. Thus did Adam disobey his Lord, and allowed himself to be seduced. But his Lord chose him for his grace. He turned to him and gave him guidance. He said, Get ye down, both of you, from the garden with enmity one to another. But if there comes to you guidance from me, whosoever follows my guidance will not lose his way nor fall into misery. But whosoever turns away from my message, verily for him is a life narrowed down, and we shall raise him up blind on the day of judgment. So let's start from the top. So it says already in the beginning that God Most High made a covenant with Adam. And sometimes when you read in the Bible or the Quran, you will see the pronoun we, but it's still talking about God Most High or Allah Most High. What it is he's speaking not only for himself, but also the angels that follow his orders. So it's not like there are multiple gods, okay? In chapter 16, in verse 16, he says, And we said, meaning God said, to the angels, prostrate yourself to Adam. They prostrated themselves, but not Iblis. He refused. So you have to first understand that all these archangels, these higher cherubim and seraphim, after man was brought into existence, physically at least, the other beings of creation were told to bow down to him, okay, or prostrate before him. And all of them did except Iblis. Now, Iblis is not a fallen angel. Iblis actually is a very, very intelligent, experienced jinn. Okay, so let me repeat that one more time. In the Quran, or it is in Islamic eschatology, Iblis, Shaitan, or Lucifer, or Azazel, he's not a fallen angel. He actually is a very, very sophisticated jinn. So, as I said before, higher archangels, they don't have free will in Islamic thought, in Islamic scholarship. Therefore, they couldn't be fallen angels. So that means that Iblis would have had to been a jinn. All right. He would have had to been a jinn. So let's go to our next verse that we want to read so we can get some good context. And now we're going to go over to Surah 15. OK. All right. So we're in Surah 15 and we're going to read 28 through 43. All right. 28 through 43. All right. So listen up. Very, very important. Behold, thy Lord said to the angels, I am about to create man from sounding clay from mud molded into shape. When I have fashioned him in due proportion and breathed into him my spirit, fall ye down in obeisance unto him. So the angels prostrated themselves, all of them together. Not so Iblis. He refused to be among those who prostrated themselves. Allah said, O Iblis, what is your reason for not being among those who prostrated themselves? Iblis said, I am not one to prostrate myself to man, whom thou didst create from sounding clay, from mud molded into shape. Allah said, then get thee out of here, for thou art rejected, accursed, and the curse shall be on thee till the judgment day. Iblis said, O my Lord, give me then respite till the day the dead are raised. Allah said, respite is granted thee to the day of the time appointed. Iblis said, O my Lord, because thou hast put me in the wrong, I will make wrong fair seeming to them on earth, and I will put them all in the wrong, except thy servants among them, sincere and purified by grace. Allah said, this way of my sincere servants is indeed a way that leads straight to me. For over my servants no authority shall thou have, except such as put themselves in the wrong and follow thee. And verily, hell is the promised abode for them all. Let me see where I wanted to stop. All right, that's where we want to stop. Now let's go through this real quick. So first it says, that we all are familiar with, that God Most High wanted to fashion a man created from the sounding clay, and he breathed his spirit into him. And after this, once again, he told all the angels and all the jinn to prostrate before Adam. And all of them did it except for Iblis. In the Latin, he's known as Lucifer. And in the, I guess, quote unquote, English, he would be known as Satan. So we're talking about that head adversarial jinn. He's not a fallen angel. He's an adversarial jinn. So he chose not to bow down to Adam. And for this, he was cursed and he was kicked out of being in the presence of the Most High. All right. And as a result, Iblis asked to basically be able to survive until the judgment day. So that's why I said in previous tapes that a lot of these spiritual entities and certain jinn, they live longer than physical humans. Some of them may live to be, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years old, etc. But as far as Iblis, this top level adversarial jinn, he's going to be around from the beginning of time all the way till the end of time. So you read about Job and God Most High asked Satan, where have you come from? And he says, roaming to and fro through the earth, basically looking for your people to devour. And it also says right here, it says, for my servants, no authority shall thou have, except such as put themselves in the wrong and follow thee. So that means Iblis, the Shaitan, they have no real authority over mankind. They have no authority over the original autochthonous human and the descendants of Adam. They only have authority when you give them the authority, okay? And you allow yourself to be deceived by them. And this is essentially what happened to Adam and Eve, all right? Now, the last thing I want to read is going to be coming. It's going to be coming out of Surah 55, verse number 33. And this is very important because this is going to go into how the evil jinn and the evil men actually are working together. Okay, they're working together. Now, before I read this, let's just go over, all the notes and see where we at. So as I told you all, that Adam, or the indigenous humans of Earth, are higher than the angels and the jinn. And Shaitan, because he did not want to bow, and he was kicked out of the grace of the Most High, he decided that, well, since I'm not going to be able to, hang with God like I want, then I'm going to cause God's creation to go astray. And when he says go astray, what that means is he's going to introduce a certain knowledge to you to get you to understand that you have the choice to either follow or rebel. And he's going to leave it up to you, but he's going to do his very best to influence you to rebel like him. OK, and that's what happened to Adam and Eve. So what happened to Adam and Eve was the tree of knowledge is basically when you get an understanding that you can either make a certain type of choice of A or B, or you become aware of certain information and that you didn't know even existed. OK, and in a little while, you're going to see the tree of knowledge being actually technology, because if a lot of us are familiar with the electronic company Apple, who makes computers and phones, etc., and their logo is a bitten apple. Now you got to ask yourself, why would a technology company have a logo of a bitten apple? Because it's trying to show you that connection of the tree of knowledge going into basically the scepter of Solomon in a minute. So in Surah 55, verse 33, we're going to read about the evil jinn and evil men who are working together. Now, a lot of you all have heard about, and I don't know if it's a mythology or whatever, but they'll tell you that during the, mid 20th century, that a lot of the United States presidents over in various, we'll call UFO or remote bases in North America, were meeting with quote unquote aliens, and they was exchanging information from these aliens. What they would do is give these aliens certain human genetics and human subjects to work on. And in return, these quote unquote aliens would give them higher advanced technology that would basically help them go be progressive in the area of science. So a lot of the technology and things that man has been introduced to, there are certain, I don't know how to call it, I don't want to say fables, mythologies, but there are certain tales out there that some of this information may have been given to man by fourth dimensional or interdimensional beings. Okay. So we find this in Surah 55, verse 33, where we're going to read a verse where it basically talks about man involving himself in the space program or quantum scientific programs, and God Most High calling them out. Let's read what it says. It says, O ye assembly of jinns and men, if it can be ye pass, O ye assembly of jinns and men, if it be ye can pass beyond the zones of the heavens, and the earth pass ye. Not without authority shall ye be able to pass. Then which of the favors of your Lord will ye deny? So what you're reading right here in the Quran is where God Most High is acknowledging and he's calling out and addressing these occult inner space, Freemasonic Shriners and scientists, these quantum space programs. And he knows that man is going to try to advance himself because, as the prophet Solomon says, there's nothing new under the sun. This has happened before, where man was basically introduced to certain powerful technology and he abused some of it. OK, so an example of that would be NASA. All right. Man is being advanced in technology in a subtle way by an adversarial jinn. So even if they're not necessarily meeting with grave physical aliens in Roswell, and actually, interchanging physical information, sometimes you're going to see spiritual entities like this that come and they whisper in the ear of man. But these spiritual entities actually cannot be seen physically. OK, they cannot be seen physically. So that's an example of it right here. And I'm going to show you right here. You see how this jinn is whispering in his ear. But imagine if he couldn't see him physically. But the information and the influence, the impulses, the thoughts that may come to this man's mind actually being inspired by the jinn. All right. So this is kind of, what we're talking about. And once again, this is just a picture of a royal. Is this King Solomon? I don't know. More than likely not. It's just a picture. So now we're going to go deeper into this book on Islamic eschatology. And we're going to go into the super quantum technology of King Solomon. All right. The super quantum technology of King Solomon. Once again, this is more than likely a picture of how the Moorish Shemitic kings and emperors of the old world would have looked. So you can interchange this for being Abraham, Solomon, David, etc. They would have looked something like this. Now, what I want to do now is read chapter 5, the Jasad, the Jinn, and the death of Solomon. And we're going to go into an occult Freemasonic mystery of Solomon, which is studied by these scientific Shriners. And ultimately what this is going into the technology that was used to advance Solomon's civilization, because we are all familiar with the Hebraic ancient peoples having access to technology. For an example, you have the staff or the scepter of Moses, which was used to not only battle against the occult priesthood of evil Pharaoh, but it was also used to split the waters of the Red Sea. And we also know about the supersonic technology known as the Ark of the Covenant, where you only could be, one of the high priests to be able to deal with this technology. And this technology was used, of course, to destroy a lot of the ancient giants and to fracture those civilizations that were around prior to the flood and post the flood. So let's get a deeper understanding of some of these mysteries of Solomon. All right. It appears to be an almost universally held view that Solomon died while sitting perhaps on his throne, and that it was his dead physical body which eventually collapsed after some earthworms had spent what must have been an endless amount of time gnawing away at the bottom of his staff. Our view is that it was the Jasad who was sitting on the throne ever since Solomon died, and that he was using the staff or the Mensa of his staff for backward and forward travel in time in order to present the evil jinn live images of Solomon. Now, let's go over this real quick. So as I told you all in the previous tape, that King Solomon had a vision of this evil being that wanted to inherit his empire. And to prevent this from happening, he prayed that his empire would fall after his death. But after he died, what eventually happened is the Dajjal, through the spiritual world, assumed his image. And he was ruling, or actually acting as if he still was Solomon sitting on the throne. And the evil jinn had no understanding and could not tell the difference between the real Solomon and the fake Solomon, which was Dajjal. OK, so when you hear me read and I use that term Mensa, I'm talking about the magical spiritual powers or capabilities that the staff or the scepter of Solomon had. Now, also, when you research Hebraic literature, you will know that this staff is also known as the staff of the patriarchs, because all the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, etc., Since Adam, this staff, believe it or not, was being passed down to the indigenous autochthon patriarchs and leaders. And this staff was not only used to, help take care of business, but it had magical spiritual properties as well. But through history, you had certain corrupt Hebraic people that got access to the staff or got access to the technology, and they used it for wicked purposes. Okay, they used it for wicked purposes. So once again, the Mensa'ah is just talking about the magical properties of Solomon's staff. And one of these magical properties was time travel. Let me repeat that. One of these mystical properties was time travel. All right. Let's keep going. Now, when it says that it was some earthworms that chewed the staff of Solomon, when you read in the Quran, it'll tell you that Solomon was sitting on his throne. And when he was sitting on the throne, the evil jinn was still working in his behalf because they thought he was alive. But it actually was the Dajjal putting a superimposed image of Solomon there, deceiving them and tricking them and making them continue to work. And eventually, when they saw the staff lose its power and they saw that image disappear, that's when the evil jinn first realized, wow, Solomon has been dead for years. And we've been working for this imposter who is not Solomon. OK, so let's get a little deeper. It says, however, when the earthworms or the beast of the earth consumed the Mensa'ah of Solomon's staff, the Jusai lost the capacity to present the jinn those live images of Solomon, which showed him sitting on his throne and moving about. It was those images of Solomon which collapsed and disappeared when the Mensa'ah of the staff was consumed, and not Solomon's physical body. And only then did the jinn realize that the person sitting on the throne all this while was not Solomon, but rather someone else. So you're going to find out in a minute that these evil jinn were working on behalf of the real Solomon because they were ordered to do so. All right, so we get into that part right here. We now turn once more to the Jusad, or Dajjal, the evil one, who was shown sitting on Solomon's throne. This time, however, the Quran directs us to the occasion of Solomon's death. Allah Most High had ordered the evil jinn to work for Solomon and had warned them of severe punishment if they ever disobeyed. In the Quran, I think this is Surah 34, verse 12. Among the jinn, there were some that had been ordered to work for Solomon by Allah's leave, and whichever of them deviated from our command, him would we let taste suffering through a blaze of fire. So what you're going to learn also in the Quran is that a lot of Solomon's help from his empire was not only that he was working with men of other nations, but he was also given a certain spiritual help because Solomon prayed for wisdom. And when he prayed for wisdom, he was given this wisdom. And part of this package was that God Most High allowed him to be able to control the evil jinn. And these evil jinn were controlled and used to not only go into the depths of the ocean and get certain materials and things to help him build his temples and build certain structures that he was putting up around the world. OK, so when you look at a lot of these certain ancient, structures in the world, not only were they helped created by certain giants and larger men, but also certain spiritual entities provided information. And this was used by the men who had access to that type of power. Let's continue. The Quran identified those evil jinn as shayateen, or satanic jinn, and went on to inform us that other jinn who served Solomon while shackled in chains. So before I go forward, as I told a brother in the previous comment section, salute to him, or the previous tape, there are two types of jinn. A lot of us that have seen the movie Aladdin are familiar with what a jinn is. You got the blue jinn and you got the red jinn. And the red or the blue is going to depend on the human being or depend on the consciousness and the temperament of that jinn. So in Aladdin, Prince Ali, who was more of a righteous, just man, when the jinn was with him, he was the blue jinn. He wanted to help everybody. He wanted to bring everybody together, and he used his power to help the people. But when Jafar got him, who was basically a type of tyrant, he was a shaitan, and he used him for a lot of evil purposes to basically enslave and lock things down. All right. Now, King Solomon was not an evil man. He was a righteous, just man, or this archetype character that we call a King Solomon. So although he had access to the evil jinn, he was not using magic and things of those nature. It was actually God Most High, or the higher power, or the higher self, that directed these jinn to work on his behalf. And they weren't regular jinn. They were evil jinn. All right. And they're called satanic jinn or shaitan. In the Quran, Surah 38, verse 37 through 38, we read, and among the jinn who were ordered to work for Solomon were multitudes of shaitan who worked as builders and divers, and others linked together in fetters. So these jinn actually were forced to work for Solomon, meaning they were chained up and they were made to do different work, and assignments that Solomon put them on. But Solomon only had this power because God Most High gave it to him. So he did not use black magic to get the jinn to help him. But the jinn ended up telling that lie after his death. Let's continue. We now turn to the moment in time when Solomon died and the jinn were unaware that he was dead. Hence, they kept working until the beast of the earth came along to consume the power of Solomon's staff, that live images of Solomon collapsed. Only then did the jinn realize that Solomon was dead, and that had they known it, they would have not kept on working for so long in vain. So you got to understand this. So this evil Dajjal character, he wants to basically rule the world as a fake Shemitic Israelite. So that means that the world is going to think that he's a Shemitic Israelite. Humans are going to think that he's a Shemitic Israelite. And not only will humans think that, certain spiritual beings will think that he's a Shemitic Israelite. And because he's in the image of us as an imposter, he's able to deceive a lot of these humans and these spiritual entities. And these evil jinn, he was able to deceive them. Okay. Now let's move forward. Let's move forward. All right. Now let's read this part real quick before we move forward. Now, a lot of this story is allegorical because basically there were not real actual earthworms chewing on the staff of Solomon, which made it disappear. That is actually an allegory for something else. OK, let me get specifically where I want to be. All right. Sorry about that. I'm just getting exactly to where we want to be. All right, let's see. Allah Most Wise created those who would incrementally chip away at the power and authority of Dajjal's Israel. The chippers chip away at something located within Solomon's staff until the staff loses its divinely bestowed constitution, which allows it to be used to present such live images of Solomon as would convince the jinn that he was still alive and sitting on his throne. When the staff loses that miraculous power, the live images of Solomon, who was long dead, would collapse. And it would only be when it collapses that Dajjal, the Jasad, will lose his ability to control or convince the jinn that it was Solomon who was sitting upon the throne. At that moment, when this fact dawns upon the jinn, Dajjal's unholy state of Israel will lose the centuries-long support of the jinn, with consequences that must terrify every Zionist Jew and Zionist Christian supporter of that Israel. So let's go over this. This is the critical part. Then we're going to end it. So as I said before, Solomon had a certain power and ability that allowed him to basically control the jinn, control animals, and he was able to create and build very, very prestigious, pristine things. And a lot of these abilities were provided by the jinn. But when he died, the Dajjal, because Most High allowed him to do this, assumed the image of Solomon, and was able to deceive the jinn by using time travel. So he was traveling back and forth in time, presenting images as if Solomon was still alive, as if he was sitting on his throne, as if he was walking around his court talking to people. So the jinn, when they saw that image of Solomon as if he was still alive, handling everyday business, they thought, well, Solomon's alive, so let's just keep working. Not knowing that this is actually the Dajjal, who's traveling back and forth within time. Once again, eschatology, traveling back and forth within time, using deception and trickery, or AKA using the left-hand side of knowledge on the tree of wisdom to trick and deceive the jinn. Okay. And he was using the staff of Solomon to do this. So Dajjal was using the staff of Solomon to create these live images of Solomon. And Imran Hussein, according to him, his conclusion is that the staff of Solomon is going to lose its power by this beast of the earth. And this beast of the earth, or these creatures of the earth, really represent conscious people like me and you who are searching for the truth and eventually will expose the tricks of the Dajjal. That's what's going to happen ultimately. OK, so it will be a battle between righteous people and unjust people, as it always has been. And the power of Solomon's staff will lose its ability when people like us expose that it actually has a power. When we expose that these world leaders have actual technology that's been around since the ancient times. And a lot of things that people may talk about as quote unquote conspiracies, you call a person a tinfoil hat wearer. In other words, this information they have actually been using to control the world, because it's very similar to the type of knowledge that King Solomon had access to, except he wasn't really an evil man. You know, the people of today are a little evil. All right. Now, let's read this part. It says, when Allah Most High decreed that Solomon should die, the jinn never realized that he was dead, and there was a Jassad, or an imposter, sitting on his throne in possession of his staff. And so they continued absent-mindedly to obey and serve the Jassad until the creature of the earth consumed the power of the staff. When the power of the staff collapsed, when the powers in the staff collapsed, the jinn then perceived the reality before them, that Solomon was dead and that there was someone else sitting on his throne. The jinn then understood that they would not have continued toiling for so long in the shameful suffering of servitude to an imposter, doing all the evil things the imposter decreed that they must do on Israel's behalf. Had they used their capacity to think and to thus penetrate beyond the appearance to reach the reality, that they were being taken for a ride. So ultimately what was happening is these jinn don't have access to all knowledge and understanding like we do. And although they have free will to think, a lot of them don't think, and they're easily deceived and tricked. And the Dajjal was able to deceive these evil jinn. So a lot of us, we wonder, we see, you know, some of the evil, wicked things going on in the world. And in the book of Ephesians, it tells you that there are higher principalities of darkness that are both spiritual and human working together. All right. And in Islamic eschatology, it goes a little deeper into that in the Moorish eschatology. OK. And as you can see in front of you, this is an image of a Shemitic, man of the ancient world, medieval world. Is this Solomon? More than likely not. But he's a man that would have more than likely looked like Solomon. And as you can see in his hand, he's holding a scepter or a staff. And this is just, a little picture to give us a image of King Solomon and his scepter or his staff. So, we're going to conclude our series, with this tape dealing with the Dajjal. Of course, more information will come up in the future and we will visit it when it does. But until then, you all stay tuned and I'm out.